since this is an online panel, many of the participants here, I also see the physical participants, like June, who gave a wonderful keynote today. She has tuned in online, but we also connected with the physical room, should people still come into the physical room as well. But in any case, I'm glad to see several of you already tuned in online. And on that note, I'd like to welcome all of you to this first online panel. It's truly a pleasure to have you all in the room, or in the virtual room. And I think this will be an exciting panel where we will discuss, of course, innovation in light of the public good, with three amazing speakers. So we have Alf, who will start off, and then Mariano, and concluding with Alan. So as communicated previously, you all have 20 minutes to present. And the idea is that once you've all presented, we'll have some remaining time for an unrushed discussion about all of your wonderful topics. If that sounds good. Beautiful. Then on that note, I will hand over to the first speaker, which is Alf, who will talk, Alf Ren, who will talk to us about innovation pornography and innovation pornography. So that will be an exciting first topic to get us going. Over to you, Alf.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you can see my slides here as well. I've tried to set this up so it looks at least a little nicer than just a big slide attacking you all. My name is Alf Ren. I am a professor of innovation, design and management at the University of Southern Denmark. So I'm calling in today from sunny Copenhagen. Obviously not as sunny as Brazil, but regardless. And yes, my old marketing genes kicked in, so I call this on innovation pornography and innovation pornography. And it is an attempt to try to address some issues I've had for a very long time regarding understanding the innovation concept in a cultural context. There will be no salacious pictures, so if you're tuning in to see that, I will have to disappoint you. But there will be some commentary regarding the utilization of the pornographic gaze, as it were. But before I get there, this is sort of part of a long-term research project I have. One might even call it my core research program, namely the analysis of the socio-moral boundaries of management studies. Note, I'm not just limiting this to innovation studies, because for a very long time, my research has to, at least in a degree, focused on trying to understand what gets seen and what gets marginalized or made invisible within management studies. Already as a young man, I was interested in the question why, for instance, very few business school professors study crime, even though crime is an existing economic activity, sometimes very well organized, with profit margins that often beat out so-called more traditional classical organizations. Yet it is as if management professors shy away from touching anything with even a whiff of impropriety. That is, we choose our study objects not based on objective grounds, but socio-moral grounds, maybe even identity grounds. We often study what is proper, what is good, what is seen as always already moral, rather than seeing what is the most interesting thing in the world to study. I personally have had an interest in this because I have studied everything from crime to pornography to cannibalism to popular culture to various kinds of frivolous things, and I'm currently writing a journal article on pro wrestling, not to simply wallow in the kind of troughs of provocation, but to ask the question exactly where do our boundaries go? Why do we study certain things but not other things? Why do we study some organized or innovative aspects but not others? So that's sort of the background for this. Then to, of course, the theme, the notion of pornography. Now, Pornography is clearly one of these things that has been actually very understudied in management studies. It is a commercial endeavor. It is a endeavor that is clearly requires some degree of technical, some which, at least in some cases, demands a fair amount of understanding of marketing, of one's customers, of one's competitors, and whatnot. Yet we know that it's not studied because pornography is evil, pornography is bad, pornography is seen as an untouchable, a taboo thing for a management school professor. Ergo, there is incredibly little research done on it. This can be understood in many ways. One of the ways is to kind of say that, well, of course, there's little study of it. It shouldn't be studied because we don't want more of it. Here we come across one of these strange moral assumptions that business school professors tend to have, that as if we could actually affect the economy, that if we studied a field, that it would therefore explode in legitimacy and size. But I believe there's a deeper thing here. There's an identity thing here. We do not want to touch that which is too close to what Bataille would have called the mechanism of these mechanisms of desire. And there's also the curious thing, which that pornography isn't at all the huge business it is assumed to be. There is a deep-going mythology around pornography, that it is a humongous business, that there is tremendous profits in it, and so on. This story, the story of the tremendously big business that still isn't studied, is sort of a trauma in management studies, more broadly understood, because it kind of points to this question of what dare we, what daren't we study. I did, for a paper I'm working on, actually do a study of just how big pornography is, which is actually surprisingly little. It's sold as this tremendous, well-functioning industry, when it in fact is about the same size as the global market in potato crisps. Various kinds of salted, often freeze-dried potato treats. Now, it is therefore a minor business, in both sense of the word, minor in being very small, and also minor, and the astute listener will realize I'm making an allusion to Deleuze and Guattari here, and their notion of minor literature. And the point of Deleuze-Guattari about minor literature was, of course, that by being other, by being something that is not accepted in the mainstream, a minor literature actually gains a certain power, a certain dynamic. And I would venture that this is exactly what has happened with pornography in management and business studies. It is rather insignificant as an objective business, but tremendously significant as a marker or something, tremendously significant as a part of a greater mythology. And nowhere can this mythology be seen more clearly than in the field of innovation. There is a long-standing notion, both in standard studies, in innovation studies more generally, and particularly the popular discourse around innovation, that pornographers would be the innovators par excellence. In numerous books on innovation, there have been just asides, just small kind of references, but still many enough to warrant comment on, that in this part of the human behavior, in this part of the great human organization, there is this power that by channeling humanity's vilest desires, pornographers have managed to be tremendous innovators. I have in various ways seen claims that pornography defined what kind of videotapes became standardized. Claims that streaming video to a great extent was pioneered by pornographers, that payment systems were again pioneered by pornographers, and in a relatively bizarre claim that cryptocurrency gained its power by becoming quickly adapted by the business of smut. Now, none of these claims hold water, not a single one. Yet they are endlessly replicated in our popular discourse. When we look, for instance, at the standards war between Betamax and VHS, which is the kind of example par excellence often used to kind of say pornography sways something, there is this long claim that there was to be no pornography on Betamax, whereas VHS was very open and willing to have it. This is objectively wrong. There was pornography on Betamax. Frankly, Betamax was better for pornography and at one point had more pornography on it than VHS, in part because Betamax videos were 1 hour long and nobody cares how long your pornography is as long as it has the right content, to the Betamax had superior picture quality. Yet the myth persists. The myth that somehow VHS won out because you could get porn on it still exists to this day in the standards literature, even though it's provably wrong. And I have colleagues who've interviewed the people who designed these systems, claiming that, no, of course that's wrong, that is not true at all. In a similar manner, no, pornographers weren't first out at using streaming video. They were not the first to utilize novel payment systems. In fact, pornography has always had a humongous problem keeping payment systems. And there is no empirical proof I've been able to find that would indicate that pornography had any bigger part to play in the ascendancy of cryptocurrency. Yet that is not my interest. My interest is not the right or wrong of this. My interest is, why is it that this storyline, this discourse has existed for so long? And I have actually something along the lines of a theory for this. And that brings me back to the notion of innovation pornography. I started using the term innovation pornography to highlight that despite there being no actual empirical connections between innovation on one hand and pornography on the other, there actually are connection points that we have often kind of ignored. Most specifically, in that I claim that the specific manner in which pornography depicts what it depicts is actually something that innovation studies, particularly the popular innovation discourse, has adapted to, has, in a sense, copied. Because what is pornography? If we look beyond the sheer obscenity of it, pornography is an incredibly simplified story regarding human sexuality. It portrays what is a basic element of human life, but takes away all the problematics of it, takes away all the things that might stop sex from happening, takes away all the stuff that might impede sexuality, takes away all the mundane negotiations that may be incurred in when trying to actually have relations. Instead, pornography presents us with a perfect world, a world in which everyone is always beautiful, everyone is always horny, and everyone is always able to engage in these said activities. In the world of pornography, there are no barriers. At worst, there are things that slow you down ever so slightly. Everyone knows how a pornographic story ends. My claim in, for instance, a book I wrote on innovation for skeptics, is that this is actually how innovation is often portrayed as well. Whereas true innovation processes are incredibly messy, often work in staccato modes, have strange rhythms and strange pulsating dynamics, where errors are manifold and many prototypes need to be thrown away. The manner in which we tell the story of innovation mimics pornographic stories. It takes away all of the messiness, all the complexities, and instead presents us with perfectly just so stories, to reference Kipling, in which a young man or a woman gets an idea, gets the money to execute it, does it ever so well, everything gets adopted at slightly more or less quick paces, and in the end, everyone is happy and often so rich. That is, our narratives of innovation have taken on a specifically pornographic hue, have taken on a specifically pornographic aura. And what this is all about is that we, of course, live in an era of the pornographic gaze. We live in an era in which that which is turned into a good, that which is commodified, that which is turned into an object of desire, or at least an object of interest, gets presented with the pornographic gaze that takes away all messiness, takes away all shades of gray, unless we're talking about the 50 Shades of Grey, but that's another story altogether. And instead presents us with a perfectly linear, perfectly smooth story, a story that is even more kind of simplified than children's stories or the fairy tales of old, in which all that remains is the absolute start and the well-known end. And what I've tried to do by kind of highlighting this, by emphasizing just how many tales of innovation which could be better represented as pornographic rather than actually realistic, is that I had wanted for innovation studies to take the politics of desire seriously. Because innovation today is an object of desire. I'm sure many others have commented on this, and I know many at this conference will comment on it. But the term desire is important here. I, of course, again here reference Bataille and his desire to put desire at the very heart of society and highlight how the desirous strive actually defines us. But when it comes to innovation, this dialogue has not really extended yet. We have not kind of pointed to the fact that we are, in a sense, working with a passion of the innovation, working with a notion of innovation as the desired object met by the pornographic gaze. Unless this gets deconstructed, unless we can kind of point out the ludicrousness of turning innovation into an object of desire, what we will continue to see is the endless repetition of the same story. Pointless innovations being lauded and celebrated, not because they have a point, not because they are meaningful, but because this is what pornography does. Pornography doesn't care who is doing what to whom. Pornography only cares that it is being done, that the story keeps being retold. So what's the point of all this? Why did I want to bother you with this little diatribe? It comes from my desire not to go towards NOvation, as this conference is called, but rather something along the lines of stating we need perchance less innovation. I'm totally on board with that. But we definitely need better innovation. And a step towards improving the discourse of innovation would be to shy away from these kinds of simplistic pornographic depictions, to highlight the psychosexual tension in having innovation as an object of desire, and to see what form of engagements would be required for us to re-establish a more realist depiction of innovation. Now, coloring all what I've said so far, and I will end in approximately 1 minute before our dear convener gets very nervous, is that I work with innovation, both in academia, writing for the journals nobody reads, and reading the books that one is supposed to as an academic. But I also work with innovation on the corporate level, with corporations desiring to be innovative. And within them, there is also a hankering for something better, something that comes after this pornography. They might not have the terminology to show why they're not really impressed with the contemporary public discourse of innovation, but they realize something is wrong. For their sake, as well as for ours, we need to be better as academics to highlight also the ludicrousness, the ridiculousness, the at times obscenity of the innovation discourse, not merely to bid farewell to innovation, but to try to create a world where innovation might again gain a little more meaning beyond the fairy tales, beyond the porn. That is approximately 20 minutes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, those of you who do not wish to be limited by the binary gender. I can't hear you if you're trying to speak. I'm not sure what you're speaking under the name of Tiago Brandao, but I can only see your lips moving. So if you're trying to speak, there might be a microphone.
Not here.
Oh yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. What, so can you hear? You can hear me as well? Turn your.
With a tremendous echo, yes.
I hear it. Yeah. Now should be better.
It seems that your mic simply doesn't work, that your mic is simply turned off. You come up as not being muted, but no audio comes through. Is that correct, Alan?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing exactly the same things. You a lot of echo, and I can see Tiago. Now I see him again.
I think.
Yikes.
And this is, of course, a perfect kind of continuation of what I was trying to say. I've often pointed out that these technologies we use, we lived through a pandemic, we spent $500 million on these, and yet 5 years later, they never work properly. We congratulate ourselves for being highly technical, yet it takes a university filled with engineers to run a webinar, and most of the time that doesn't work either.
And it's the mixed medium that might be the problem, because I hear you totally perfectly, but I didn't. You said you could hear what was being said in the room. It may be your earphones are better than my speaker, but I was having a little bit of trouble understanding what was said in the room, even before the echo. Oh, I'm not speaking Portuguese. What? Do you get that out?
No, I'm not. I'm just getting this is being transcribed, but I get nothing from our chairman, which is a shame, since he seems to have a lot to say, but we can only see him miming.
I just got a note from the transcription service saying, it seems you are speaking a different language. Could you change to what? Which is a little bit much, that is a little bit much. I know I have a northern dialect, but that's a little bit much to say I'm speaking a different language.
Well, when I spend more time in Manchester, I do pick up a bit of Mancunian. Yeah. So, and I would claim that is a different language.
That I'm from even more north than that. But do we talk amongst? And what about the people who are online, like Pierre Benoit?
I'm going to try this again. Now, can you now hear me?
Yes, that's better. Slight echo, but still.
Slightly better. I do hear an echo. Yeah, still the echo still there. How about now? Perfect. Great. Yes, it works now. Thank you. Just now my image doesn't work. Okay, there we go. All right, good. We got there. So sorry for those technical hindrances, although I must say I did enjoy your conversation in the background as we were trying to resolve this. I'm happy we did get this resolved. And all I was saying was, well, thank you to Alf for opening this panel and for providing a new, fresh perspective to the innovation discourse. And for anyone that just came in or came in a bit later, the idea or the format of the panel is that we all have 20 minutes to present, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. So if anyone has questions, please keep them for after all three speakers have presented. So on that note, I want to thank Alf again and hand over to Mariano, who will talk us through his presentation. Apologies again for the technical difficulties, and I look forward to Mariano's presentation.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I apologize in advance because my house is a building site right now. They are building my carpentry workshop next to me. So if you hear some noises, these are the builders working. Okay, so this is a paper that we wrote with Adrian Smith. The idea was to discuss the new debate on innovation policy that's going on, has been going on for a few years, and trying to bring a more political and economic perspective, maybe more political sociology perspective to it. As you might know, there have been a few discussions about how innovation policy can tackle global challenges like climate change or increasing inequality, energy transitions, and so on. And there are mainly two visions about that. One is Mazzucato visions on the entrepreneurial state, how we have to retrieve the idea of the entrepreneurial state. And then there is Johann Schott and Steve Miller idea of transformative innovation. And we are going to focus on that, maybe with some comments on Mazzucato. The paper of Schott and Steve Miller is very interesting because they periodize innovation, and they say, okay, there were three frames of innovation. The first one is more or less big science, where the main actor is the state. The state was the driver of innovation in the 50s and 60s. And the idea was to promote innovation in order to promote growth and development. Then at the beginning of the 70s, it started the second frame around the idea of entrepreneurship and commercialization of knowledge. It's basically the neoliberal take on innovation, where the focus was not so much on growth or development, but on competitiveness, building capabilities, and the idea of national systems of innovation. And of course, that changed the main actor from the state to firms, commercial firms, which at the end, they started to design the policy agenda. What Schott and Steve Miller says about that is, okay, this has worked for some time, but it's not enough. These frames are not enough to tackle the challenges that we are facing now. And the main reason is that the externalities that these frames are helping to build in terms of pollution, inequalities, and other externalities cannot be resolved by the innovation that we produce. We need another kind of innovation. And therefore, they bring this idea of political economy. How do we do another kind of innovation? If we want to change this matrix of innovation, how we do it? So what they say is we need to widen the idea of who can do innovation. So they invite somehow users, cooperatives, social movements, grassroots innovation to participate somehow in this idea of transformative innovation. The underlying idea of transformative innovation is that it's not enough just to design a new technology. You have to do structural change. That's the political economy part of the argument. New actors, but also it's not about technology anymore. It's about structural change. So in order to do structural change, you have to bring political economy. You have to bring discussions about who's going to be the beneficiary of that, who's going to be the losers, what kind of power movements you have to do in order to change the energy system, the production system, the innovation system. And all this discussion is very interesting. We agree totally with that. But at the same time, it's kind of weird that we are having this discussion about new innovation frames, and there's almost no mention to the new technologies that are shaping our idea of how we live in a world of innovation, information, data. So in the paper of Sean and Smith, there is almost no mention of machine learning, big data, digital corporations, and you can say almost the same about Mazzucato, because the vision of the state that Mazzucato presents is there's no clear view of how this new entrepreneurial state is going to deal with big corporations. So there's some gaps there. At the same time, we noticed in our research that there are these under the radar actors that are doing innovation and producing data, producing science, but they are not usually taken seriously by the state or by policy makers. So the paper is mostly about questions, how we can help to shape this transformative innovation, and what could be the role of these new actors that we identify. And for us, these actors are interesting because they do open and collaborative innovation. So there are mainly three different forms of doing open and collaborative innovation. One is the initial form, which was mainly hackers and programmers. It goes by the name of peer-to-peer innovation, peer-to-peer production. And you can, if I say peer-to-peer production, you maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but you surely know Linux or Wikipedia or Arduino. So these are examples that are widely used of peer-to-peer production, which is mainly based on open data, open designs, decentralized collaborative networks, a non-hierarchical form of innovation. And this has been quite successful, but it's also being captured by big corporations right now. So then you have a newer form, which is basically what scientists interpret of this peer-to-peer production, how they translate that into scientific practices. So there you have open data for science, open hardware for science, open evaluation, and citizen science. Especially citizen science. Citizen science is a more democratic, if you want, part of scientific production. And it has been quite successful in the last few decades. And all these policies of open science are has been growing for some time. And that started to be taken serious by UNESCO, by different development organizations like OCDE, like Inter-American Development Bank. They are promoting these practices. And states like in Argentina or Brazil, in Colombia, they are taking this seriously. They are building policy programs about open science and citizen science. And then you have open innovation, which also has a long history before digital innovation. You can trace that via Chesro to Xerox, Palo Alto, but with software and now with machine learning, the practices of open innovation have taken another scale. They are not, the idea of open innovation is not resisted anymore by digital corporations. It has been taken in, they are promoting it. So this is not something marginal anymore. You have companies like Facebook or Google that are promoting open software products as a way to experiment with new technologies and to attract developers and programmers. And so that's growing as well. So the questions around that is how big is this kind of open and collaborative innovation, and how we can understand that in order to include this idea of innovation in the transformative frame. So first, there is a question of scale. When you talk about scientific research, even large-scale projects, I don't know, like the large collider project, or I don't know, most of the large scientific projects, they have a couple of thousand researchers, maybe 10,000 researchers. But when you go to see Linux, or when you go to see Wikipedia, Wikipedia had 100,000 collaborators, more or less. And when you go to see big citizen science project like eBird, which is registering birds in different parts of the world, or eNaturalist, which is registering all kinds of species in different parts of the world. This project like eBird has 300,000 collaborators. eNaturalist has more than 1 million collaborators worldwide. So the scale of these projects is huge. It's much bigger than most companies, most commercial firms. And it also presents a challenge because it's a lot of collecting intelligence, but it's very different how to manage these volunteers, because they volunteer, they are not paid, they may volunteer one day and not every day. So there is a question of participation there. There's a very nice book of Kelty about it's called The Participant, and Kelty basically says we don't really understand what participation is. There's something going on there that is much more than the results. So if you want to explore that, you have to think about what kind of communities are being formed in these projects. And that's very different to work, to a paid job, because it's based on social relations, on community, or on ideas of altruism, for example. Okay, that's one thing. Then, first one, scale. Then you have organization. What kind of organization this project have? And there's a lot of literature about that. Of course, these projects are based on open design, open data, open software, so everybody can share that. There's a separation between property and management of the projects, so it's very different from a typical commercial firm. They are also decentralized. You don't usually have a single place of work. people around the world. So you can, at the same time, you can bring all these kind of different experts, which is very interesting. And they can run innovation projects at much lower cost than the typical commercial film, because you are relying on volunteers and you're relying on collaboration. And you can bring experts. You're not limited to pay experts. You can bring experts that want to join the project if the project is interesting. But how to organize that? How to organize that from point of view of policy? How to manage that? It's a big question. For example, if you want to do some kind of state innovation policy, because usually governmental agencies are very afraid of this kind of open collaboration. So there's a question there between how we are going to include, how we are going to manage the tension between traditional expertise based on government agencies or universities and this kind of decentralized expertise that these projects bring in. And then lastly, there's a question of what kind of subjectivity, what kind of actors are these forms of innovation? What kind of actors participate in this kind of innovation? And one of the things that happen when you start reading or trying to figure out what's going on in open and collaborative innovation is that there are a lot of names. You have peer-to-peer production, you have hackers, you have makers, you have fun lovers, you have citizen science, you have citizen sensing, you have community science, you have the participatory science, open innovation, public innovation. There's a lot of different terms trying to name a thing it's bigger and bigger and bigger. And then in the last few years, a few authors outside the field of innovation started to name this in a different way. So you have, for example, Mackenzie Ward, and what she says is this is a new actor, but it's not a new actor only in a kind of social movement or collective agent. It's a new class. And what Mackenzie Ward says, you have a creative class and you have the vectoring class. And the creative class is basically the hacker class, which is bound to create. If the working class used to work against time, trying to produce repetitive things, the hacker class is bound to create new things all the time. And they are facing antagonist class, which is the big digital corporations. So in this Marxist sense, Mackenzie Ward is saying we have a new actor, it's a new class, and it's defined for what they produce, and they produce content, they produce novelty, they produce scientific papers, they produce movies, they produce books, they produce journalism, and so on. Then you have authors like Adam Arvidsson, and he talks about change makers. And he says, okay, there always has been people who has been on the margins of the conventional economy, but now you have all this new class of people with the informal economy and entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, they don't want to work anymore for a big corporation. They want to control something of their life, because if you don't have access to a good job, or if your job doesn't have any sense, or doesn't provide a good care of you, or you can, if you are not have a good prospect, you can progress in that job. Well, it's better to have your own thing. Be a designer, or build your own product, or provide your service, and you are on your own. And this is a way of controlling a part of your life, even though you're gonna be always on the brink of losing everything, but at least you control something. And this is a kind of new subjectivity going on there, because this idea of control is also against controls from the state, controls from government, from taxes, from the elites, and all these talks about subjectivity, they resonate a lot in Argentina and Brazil right now, because we have this ultra-right phenomenon. At least in Argentina, what is powering this phenomenon in some part is a very young class of people who is attached to this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, and nobody's talking to that. The only people who is talking to this new class of young people, entrepreneurial people, is the ultra-right. So there is an interesting thing going on there, but still, how we can design policies to promote this kind of entrepreneurial work and jobs and creativity if there is a tension between this kind of creativity and the elites and the state and the idea of being taxed. So this presented a whole new set of challenges. Okay, so we have scale, we have new kind of organization, and we have new kind of subjectivity. We don't have an answer to that. So the aim of the paper is just to say, okay, there's something going on, something under the radar, and it's not a small thing. It's a new form of organization. We have very different names, but it's very powerful, and we need to pay a bit more of attention to that if we want to do transformative innovation. Okay, thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mariano. I hear the echo again, but they're gonna take it off. Yes, beautiful. So no, thank you so much, Mariano, for sharing your reflections and your paper in development. I'm sure there will be several questions and discussions following your presentations. But before we go there, we will conclude with a third presentation by no one less than Alan Irwin. So I look forward to hearing your presentation, Alan, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm trying to share my screen. Has that worked? Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is in a small scale though. So,
yeah. And how do I get out of that then? Oh, is that okay?
Yes, that's the one.
It's okay? Yeah, thank you, Lucien. Perfect. Wow, that's quite a mix of topics, and there's so much to talk about already. So I'm going to add another angle into the mix. But first of all, thanks for the invitation, and I wish I was there with you, although it is a lovely evening in Copenhagen, I have to say. And as you see here, I'm at Aarhus University and at Copenhagen Business School, so I'm in two places at the same time. But my general theme is to come at innovation from a science and technology studies background. And what I really want to do in the 20 minutes, let me start my countdown, is to raise some questions about that. And I just want to stress from the beginning that I'm by no means the first person to talk about that relationship. And some people might know more about science and technology studies than others, but it's one which I've come back to several times in my career, even though I know that people have gone before me, probably because back in the days of ancient times or the primeval sludge, innovation and SDS were kind of taught together. It wasn't always the case that we thought of innovation studies and SDS as separate entities. So I think I've always had an interest in how might you bring those two together. And if that's working, Lucien, I've just changed my slide. And could you give me a thumbs up to say I have changed my slide? Yes, thank you. So a lot of this is, it's because I can see you, Lucy. A lot of this is encapsulated in this thematic collection, which appeared in the online open access journal, Engaging STS, Engaging Science, Technology, Society, just at the very end or almost at the beginning of this year. So I'm going to say something about this as a project, and hopefully that will create some discussion, but you can see the reference right there. And what was very interesting to do for me as a project was to find not just that a lot of people have gone down this road already. The thing you can see up there is the editors of Engaging STS, or ESTS as I will call it. They're very nice opening piece. But we managed to raise a series of questions, which I would argue are relevant specifically to STS, but I think go much more broadly, and that's what I'd like to think about. So when it comes to engaging with and acting upon socio-technical change, is innovation part of the solution or of the problem? I think both Alf and Mariano have touched upon that, but it might be something we can come back to, this kind of ambivalence about innovation as solution or innovation as problem. The second question in that thematic collection that gets discussed is, well, what about the relationship between STS, which is particularly my background, but neighboring fields, including perhaps especially innovation studies? One way of thinking about the relationship is to see them, and this is a common way of kind of constructing the narrative, as being together in the 70s, and then STS becoming perhaps more sociological, perhaps more qualitative, ethnographic in approach, whereas innovation studies takes a more economic kind of perspective. There are notable people who've straddled those two things, but I think very often when people think of the relationship to STS and innovation studies, they're thinking about this kind of methodological come theoretical divide. And then very generally, what can STS bring to the party? And you please could look for yourself, but Tiago is in right there. So the idea was to invite a collection of people with different angles on that. I think the questions that I just touched upon were what was interesting. I think really my motivation was simply to cause a debate and to get different perspectives. And one thing I'll just say about this is the pedagogical aspect of it was not lost. So many colleagues, including Tiago and Carolina, that you can see up there, produce some very nice resources, in their case particularly about Benoit Gaudin and some of his angles, but his perspectives very importantly. And there's a range of opinions here. You can see Lucas and Hernan saying innovation doesn't work. I think Pankaj Seksaria asked this interesting question, well, what is innovation in the non-English languages? What happens when innovation gets translated across context? Judith Sutz, many will know. Shabita Pathasarathi talking about innovation in different contexts. Sebastian Fottenhauer, really basically saying, well, yes, it's innovation that's required, but it's better innovation rather than more. Sally Wyatt actually contributes, I must say, a very nice set of teaching resources also, as well as her article. And she takes us back to the 70s, in fact, with some of the reading lists. Maya talks about dissolving boundaries. Lily Irani, many of you will know her work, has a rather critical perspective on innovation. So, and there's also something coming up in the Elgar Encyclopedia of STS, and Sebastian and I have written something about that. So what's the problem, or what's the issue here? Certainly, as I've said already, there have been many contributors who have sought to be both in science and technology studies and innovation studies. And Ari Rip comes to mind there immediately. Many of us would know Ari's great work over many years, Robin Williams in Edinburgh, and Pierre-Benoit Joly, who I think is there. Hi, Pierre-Benoit. I mean, so there are a list, actually, when you start to compile the list, it gets longer and longer. In the introduction to this piece, I started off with 6 or 7 names, including the ones I've just given, and then kept thinking, oh my goodness, I've missed out this person, I've missed out that person. So the list got longer and longer. Therefore, it's very hard to say that STS and innovation have not worked together, because demonstrably they have. But somehow I feel, but we might discuss this, the tension is still there between the not just the methodologies, but the kind of concerns, the abiding concerns of SDS compared to innovation studies. As I say, there are many SDS centers actually include innovation in their title. And then more interestingly, perhaps the next point, a lot of contributions to SDS, including ideas like transformative innovation, which Mariano was just talking about. I know the people who put forward transformative innovation, Johann Scott and Ed Steinmiller, and not primarily speaking from an STS perspective. And I don't mean to steal their ideas, but you can see an influence. I would say the same thing with discussions of responsible innovation. I'm not trying to grab them for STS. That isn't correct. There are many routes. But I would say, again, in discussions about responsible innovation or transformative innovation, some STS sensibilities, let's say, particularly concerning questions of multiple imaginations of innovation, or questions about expertise and knowledge and the contestation over knowledge claims, you can see here. And actually, that's also true of user studies. Again, there are multiple routes there. But I think STS, I would argue, has made a contribution. Scott is the social construction of technology, which probably is more on the STS side. But the thinking behind it, the idea that, just like in sociology of science, that facts don't get established just because they're right. There's some kind of process of network building that is seen to be very similar. And I'm thinking of Pierre Benoit's, Benoit Joly's arguments on models of innovation. When I mentioned that, obviously that's great work. I mean, I think the final point also is that STS work is often being perhaps more critical. Some people in innovation studies think, well, they accuse their own discipline. It's not necessarily true, but they accuse their own discipline of thinking that all innovation is good innovation. I wouldn't think that that was true of STS approaches to it. So there are many contributions, often working like ideas of open innovation, very strongly with people from the innovation studies community, and using ideas from innovation studies. And you can point to much from an STS perspective that is real. So what's the problem then? What is it that is, so to say, bugging me about that relationship? Well, one thing is, and I really find this very interesting, the discussion among innovation studies scholars. And this is Luc Soter, who, again, many of you will know, a very distinguished innovation studies scholar. And Luc, as I read him here, is basically, calling out SDS, saying, well, and this is his language, not mine, of course, it's time for SDS to come out of its disciplinary comfort zone, describing concepts, taxonomies, and theoretical frameworks, and pragmatically describe how particular challenges of sustainability and social inclusion would be addressed. So that's a particular provocation to STS to say, we may think we're doing good work, but is it so obvious to everyone else that STS is doing good work? And one can quibble and argue about that and say, oh, come on, that's not fair. But a little bit of me thinks, is there a point there? When it comes to discussing innovation, despite what I've already said, I'll just emphasize it one last time, of all the great work that's been done, which links those two areas together, is there a sufficiently distinctive voice? And to put it more bluntly, has the innovation policy field been largely dominated by innovation studies with STS's voice, not least around issues like social inclusion, insufficiently addressed? So that's the kind of discussion that's going on within that special issue about, is it true that STS is seen to be marginal within the discussion of innovation? And if so, what do you do about it? I personally don't see that as a negative challenge. I think it's very interesting to see how it looks, so to say, from the other side of the fence. The other thing about this is that innovation, and both Mariano and Alfred pointed to this, how this is my language, not theirs, but innovation is part of the problem, that is back to this issue of ambivalence, around ambivalence. What does it even mean to talk about innovation democracy? Mariano was kind of getting at this for me. It's hard enough, and many of us have worked on public engagement with science. It's hard enough to imagine a kind of democratic discussion about science. It seems even harder to think of a democratic discussion about innovation. Andy Sterling, of course, has written about that. Andy is another person who you can see as linking innovation and STS. Still, and this is very familiar from public engagement with science, the need to counter technocratic and deficit discourses. In other words, the diffusion model, which is often being discussed. I guess that's the basics among STS in a rather critical way, and not only by Bruno Latour, I should say. That there's still the same challenge of the way in which innovation is presented. I'll quickly show you an example, and here I think STS has probably been rather good at developing a more pluralistic imagination of innovation. It still seems that our imaginations get stuck, sometimes linked to the previous point, that it's a kind of technology-led imagination of what innovation would be. So what does it mean to innovate in, well, take one of the moment, artificial intelligence, but you start from the technology and imagine forward from there, rather than doing the opposite thing, which is to say, well, what kind of social structure are you looking for, and how might technologies be of assistance in developing those democratic social processes? So, I think there's a debate, and it's not unique to STS, and it's a legitimate discussion. It's, I think I know where I am, and that you can probably hear or guess that already. But there is a legitimate question about, does the language of innovation carry so much conceptual baggage that it's better to stay outside? I think many colleagues in STS, but not only in STS, treat the whole concept of innovation with some skepticism, because the very formulation of the issue in terms of innovation could be seen to be so loaded that the things I just hinted at about democratic engagement or multiple imaginations of the future are simply closed down. Or, and you guessed this one is coming, is there a productive role for STS and other scholars within mainstream innovation debates on organizations? I think scholars in the STS field make good arguments on either side. I can certainly see the argument on either side. I mean, why would you want to start with a concept of innovation? Why wouldn't you start with a concept like democracy, to use a different term? So why start there? Isn't that so problematic? However, I can't help but lean towards the second, because it seems that there's a lot of ground that could be covered, and which needs to be covered. And I don't know who's going to do it if STS scholars aren't in a position to do that. And the kind of thing I've got in mind, and which we discuss in this thematic collection, is, could this be a way of opening up different enactments and experiences of innovation? One of the nice things I really liked about that collection was that it certainly wasn't perfect, but to have scholars, not least from South America, I have to say, bringing perspectives which might not be the same as someone like me based in Western Europe. So, how do we deal with these multiple experiences of innovation? What about the definition of innovation, which is so often led by technology? Because people also talk about social innovation and open innovation and a million other words put before innovation, which suggests it, but there still is very obviously a dominant model of what innovation is about. Rather like the sociology of science, and again, this this is not new, but it could give more emphasis to examining the social institutional processes involved. And you might expect from an SDS perspective questions of epistemology, or what counts as knowledge, to be particularly important. For me, and I don't know how clear that is the way I've written it, but having a sense of innovation as problem and innovation as solution, being alive at the same time, seems to be quite essential, that we remember both assets. So I don't think the either or thing I was presenting before about the conceptual baggage versus the wish to kind of intervene, that shouldn't be forgotten, because I think it's always important to think about, well, for whom is innovation a problem and for whom is it a solution? And what is the relationship across different contexts? I think that's a key point, across different contexts between those two things. So I'm starting to wrap up now. I've still got 3 minutes or so, but I may be rather generous in terms of when I started my stopwatch. I won't go into detail, but I already said, the case of AI is the one that everyone's talking about right now. So it's a little bit cliche. This is, as you can see, a Danish center. It's a so-called pioneer center, which in the Danish research landscape means it's a very high level activity geared potentially towards something like Nobel Prizes. It's a way of conjuring up that sense of extremely high level scientific achievement. But what gets me is the statement beneath: artificial intelligence will contribute to solving big societal challenges. And I think, who are we trying to convince when we say that? Why that kind of language, particularly the language of certainty around AI? I suspect many of us would question the statement or want to add, something like perhaps yes, but perhaps no. We don't know. But you see the confidence and all the things that I was hinting at before, the assumption that artificial intelligence will itself contribute, ignoring, of course, all the social and political and economic processes which are going to be necessary. So that rhetoric, the simple kind of deficit rhetoric of technology producing solutions, is still out there. I don't know if I would call that pornographic, Alf, but there is something definitely of a fairy story in a kind of generic sense that's put out there, which is, of course, I'm not saying the scientists themselves have produced this. It's people somehow trying to represent the science, possibly for a larger public audience. But it's definitely a simplification, as crude a simplification as you get, because the first thing we want to say is, well, AI is probably not going to do anything on its own. It will only do that by social, political, institutional change. So my conclusion: SDS's contribution never went away, and it's always been there. But modestly in this company, I would say, working with colleagues across disciplines, it is a crucial time to bring that forward, not particularly for SDS's sake, but just because I think the discussion about innovation desperately needs some of those questions to be asked, and asked forcefully. So that is back to where I was before. That's the special issue. And I hope you feel interested enough to look at it if you haven't already, and perhaps to use it in teaching purposes, because we certainly have an eye to the fact that this is something that should be communicated, not least to our studies, to our students working both in SDS but also in innovation. Thank you.
Yes, I purposely waited a second there to avoid any further echoes. Thank you so much, Alan, for concluding panel with another wonderful presentation and linking some of the previous thoughts as well presented. So we have over 30 minutes to discuss the three presentations in an unrushed sense. So I'll look both, or I'll keep an eye both on hands, and I see one already raised in the online panel, but also we've got some people in the lecture room. So if there are questions here as well, please do raise your hand, and then you might have to come take my seat and ask the question here. But I will start with a question from Renee.
Hello there. I hope you can hear me and that there is no echo. Okay. Well, no. Well. Thanks for this for the panelist, and my reaction, I think, is probably most to Alan once, because Alan's contribution triggered off some memories by myself, because when I introduced responsible innovation at the European Union level, so at the end of the 2010, around that time, the whole idea of responsible innovation was actually to address the issue that we don't have proper governance structures for the outcome of science and technology. We have all kinds of conditions for the market, for individual firms, but we don't have governance structures for the outcomes. And subsequently, there has been quite a lot of funding for STS people to do something reasonable with this notion, but unfortunately, very little focus on this aspect, not even on the aspect of addressing market failures, because this is where it's all about when you want to have transformative innovations or whatever. So this is a sort of criticism of STS as a big lacume in thinking and reflection in that area. But in the meantime, the whole concept of open innovation, which comes, of course, from all kinds of directions, did produce a new sort of paradigm, although not sufficient in my terms, in terms of responsible innovation, because I will explain this later, because this is the critical element, I think, here. And this relates also what Mariano has said. Of course, typically for open innovation is that we move away from innovations which are inaugurated by firms or individuals to collective forms of innovations where collaboration and open knowledge flows are central. This is typical for innovation, and this gives a lot of power in the development, especially in the digital technologies. The producers of technology have less and less governance over what eventually will come out of it. But this comes, of course, back to my original issue of how do we govern the outcomes of science tech, because open innovation, of course, does not produce what I at that time, let's say, still mention what are actually the right outcomes of science and technology. So this issue of governance still remains. Now, open innovation does give us a leeway, though, a first step. The essential issue, though, is whether open innovation is socially produced, yes or not, or that it is a market-conform introduction of let's say, new tech or new fusions of new tech. So, and I think the whole idea of social produced innovations which serve communities or serves the public good, which is the theme of the conference, this is actually where I was after 15 years ago. It's about the outcomes and the governance of outcomes of science and tech, and producing common goods or make them renewable, if you want to put it in the modern terms now. But this whole issue is still lacking. And the crucial element is so, and this is what I was wondering why this is so less highlighted in the STS world, is that the investment by the public actors, so by public states, investment in innovation in the last 30 years has been reduced. I mean, the governments have, and also supra governments have retreated from their influence on what I would say, would be a proper governance of the outcomes of science and technology. And of course, that's the neoliberal paradigm, but we are stuck with it. And you see now a slow slow. We are probably on the deepest point right now, and we're coming back a little bit with the Green Deal, where you see a lot of legislative actions, and government interventions to push us in a direction, but still with the ideology it should be market conform, and this, of course, will not work. And so I think there the work of Macchiato is helpful. I think, because normally the economists have not been helpful for many decades. So for this time, it's something which comes my way. But I think the whole issue here, the critical issue, and probably you will agree with me, Alan, it's about whether these innovations are socially produced or not, with a few by communities or with a common good in mind. And this is, unfortunately, when it comes to transformative innovations, not something which can necessarily be done market conform, and which needs a complete overhaul of our current IPR regime. And that's, again, an issue where STS, I didn't see many critical studies of IPR regimes by STS students. I saw them from lawyers and from all kinds of critical people, but not from STS. So sorry to have to repeat that, but but that's caused by you gave me this memory, because what I tried to do 15 years ago is still an open agenda. How do we have a proper governance of the outcome? And there has been so little done on this area, not even on addressing market failures, So just an example, we still don't have, in the last 20 years, not a single new antibiotic has been produced. Why is that? That's because we are stuck with the wrong fundamentals. So why not focus on this?
Can I comment, Lucien?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
So first of all, Renee, I apologize on behalf of my colleagues. You really should have given the money to me, though, but that's understandable. I think there's a few things to say about that. One is, I guess I didn't really say this, but one of the unfortunate things, and I can see Pierre Benoit coming after me, so he's perfectly positioned to comment on this, about that split between STS and IS, is that economics area was seen as the territory of IS, so they do the stuff on IPR and patents and things like that, and then STS takes the non-economic. There are significant exceptions to that. And Pierre Benoit knows all about that. But there's something about if SES does not engage with those, let's call it political economy type issues, then it's going to be very limited. So one of the nice things about putting the two together is to say, well, could we not kind of do that? Not only critiquing the economic models, but also saying, well, what are the legitimate questions of an economic, but also a political nature, which sometimes slip between these two disciplines or two approaches. On the governance structures, yes, I do agree with that. There's an old argument about risk. There used to be a debate about what is an acceptable level of risk. And my own conclusion from that question was, it's really, really hard to say what's an acceptable level of risk, but you can talk about what's an acceptable process for deciding about risk. And so to me, it is not so much on outcomes, but more on, do we believe that this is the way in which innovations are occurring right now are based on a kind of socially acceptable process? And very often the answer for me anyway is going to be no. I mean, you see this, with ChatGPT a year ago, you see various people, including me, jumping up and down, trying to react and try to interpret this. But I mean, the possibilities for democratic scrutiny or control over something extremely limited when that is the scenario with which you're pointed. So I think the governance processes have got to be crucial. This is by no means easy. But the third thing I would say is, back to the picture I had of the Pioneer Center on AI, if that's how it's presented, then you have really very little chance of having any sort of scrutiny or process, because it was AI that's going to solve the problems, not us. So there is a role, and perhaps STS should be stronger and be more in the public discussion about that, to say, look, to take that old slogan from STS, it could be otherwise. It could be different. There are different ways of going about this. So there's something, to use an old-fashioned term, technological determinism, which is really limiting the possibilities for engagement. But yeah, so much there in terms of the possibilities, and perhaps that's something. Well, perhaps this conference could be a good way of bringing those different elements together. Then I'll stop, but I could continue.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Pierre Benoit.
Perhaps Alf wants to react now. No, it's another point. Okay. So thanks, many thanks to the three of you for this very inspiring presentation. Well, the elephant in the room, and you already talked about it, is the state, the government, and public policies. And I guess that the criticism of Luc Soet comes from innovation studies, where the study of public policy is the center core. So, okay, you are very smart guys, but so what? But this morning we had a very nice talk by June Sequeira, precisely on that, on the core importance of the public economic system to understand the dynamics of innovation. I guess that it is very important to build on these and issues of military technologies, issues of property rights, as you mentioned, issues of what is growing now is well, technological sovereignty. If you take the example of China, in many areas, I guess that we have to understand also is an important actor. If you take electrical vehicles, the models of innovation in China are really innovative, kind of administrative Darwinism. So it's not a model I wish to import, but we have. So I guess that the type of subjects we choose to work on, perhaps we have to go to other subjects that those we work on usually. But my question, to be short, is on the political economy. Actually, Mariano mentioned that well, dealing with transformative innovation implies that we have to have a political economy view of the problems, and I would like you to elaborate a bit on that. And I guess that in the relation between innovation studies and STS, this question of how we take into account what we can call political economy of STS is really an open question. That the end of the 2000, Daniel Kleinman, Scott Frickel proposed a new political sociology of science, but I guess that it doesn't do really the job. So how do we take into account the role of incumbents, the role of dominant actors, the role of structural asymmetries of power, and so on and so forth? And I guess that if I have something to recommend to students when they start to make a study, is to look at that. Who are the main actors? What are their resources? What are the relations of power, and so on and so forth? And in STS, we draw on the framework of co-production, which is fine. But okay, the interests are not fixed; they are produced by the and blah blah blah. And so and I guess that in the situation we are, where we have a tension, and I guess that we are more and more in conflicting situation. I guess that this type of analysis is very important. So the society is more fluid than it was in the 70s, and we are, because of the intensity of the problem. So what is political economy for you as an analytical concept, Mariano?
I'll allow Mariano to answer, and then I'll move on to Alf, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the question, Pierre. Well, I think you mentioned a few things there. One way to answer this, it's maybe this is a provocation for Alan as well. I think that STS, but also maybe innovation studies in a less sense, but especially STS has been too much focus on micro-sociology, micro-stories, small cases. And there are plenty of questions about power there and subjectivity, but it's less about who has the power in a big sense. Who are the corporations? Who have the most IP? Who has the most resources? The most computing power? The most financial support? Who dominates the expertise in a bigger sense? Who has the knowledge to produce weapons or to produce drugs or to produce energy systems? So, in a sense, since we are in a moment where we are in a transformation, in a techno-economic transformation of the economy, Carlota Perez will say, we have to go back to these questions about power, about the distribution of resources, about expertise and work, and that's a part of the political economy. So you can go back to Marx and to the interpretation of political economy of science in the 70s and how different social movements in the 60s and 70s translate these Marxist ideas and Weberian ideas into different interpretation of science and technology, and they propose their own idea of technology. I'm talking about the radical technology movement in Europe, the appropriate technology movement in worldwide, the people science movement in India, for example. They took this idea. They not only did a critique, they propose ideas about and policies about science and technology, and different uses of science and technology. So I think that on the one hand, when they talk about political economy, you have to have a critique, and you have to use this and you have to retrieve this concept about power and actors and differentials of expertise and so on. But you also have to start doing some kind of vision about the future, because there's no point of doing a political or a critique of the political economy without proposing an alternative. And I think that's also lacking right now in the STS and innovation studies. Innovation studies is more or less because they have a better relation with policymakers. They know they have to propose something else. But I don't know about STS. I'm wondering about that. That's a question for myself as well. I don't know how to do that. I know we have to produce something else because there is a dominant narrative, which is the ultra-right narrative. It's already capturing the zeitgeist, you know? There is a lot of new people in town. There's a lot of young people who don't believe in they are doing innovation, they are doing creative stuff all the time, but they don't believe in the state, and they don't believe they are starting to disbelieve in democracy. We have to have an answer for these people, because we are going to lose them. And I'm sure that we are not going to convince anybody doing microsociology. And that's a problem right now. We have to change our own narrative in some sense.
Thank you, Mariano. Alf, you had your hand up patiently for quite a while, so all yours.
Okay, a few comments. First, I have to comment to René's point about antibiotics. This year, we've actually discovered zosuraballpins, which is an entire class of antibiotics. So there is progress even in pharmaceuticals. They're limited in use, but it is a new class of antibiotics, so that should at least count. What I'm sitting and kind of thinking here is that, well, What if it's all what if the fault is all on innovation studies? What if it's innovation studies itself is to blame? Because if we kind of look at what's been discussed here, there's a number of what I would kind of call fetish objects that are being brought about. You have Mariana's The Entrepreneurial State. I mean, I like Mariana a lot. She's nice. It's not that. But I mean, the notion of the entrepreneurial state, which I've also kind of pointed out to her, kind of establishes this notion of the state, almost a Schmittian notion. It's almost as, I didn't want to tease her to kind of ask, wouldn't it be better if you had an entrepreneurial Führer? It kind of establishes this notion that there is a category such as the state, a given thing which we can now imbue with entrepreneurial power, which can generate innovation. Now, the mechanistics of this is quite disturbing to me, but also understandable, because we need this fetish object to believe in a entrepreneurial state that can present us with these solutions. It is a perfect deus ex machina, a perfect kind of end to a fairy tale of having now the state comes in and solves this. Similarly, open innovation, which is a category I've always had a tremendous amounts of problems with, because I've always asked, open for whom? It's the notion that you can just take two good words and then it becomes super plus good, with excuses to Orwell, is to me a highly problematic rhetorical maneuver. I've read quite a lot of the theories around open innovation, and not a single one of them points, for instance, to class consciousness. And let us remember that when we originally talked about the notion of freeing emancipatory moves, we have to go back to Lukács, we have to go back to the question of ideology, and we have to go back to the question of class. Mariano kind of highlights very well the fact that we have this young generation, which I also think needs to be understood from a class perspective. But then we need to kind of actually ask the questions, are we hiding away questions of class consciousness behind kind of lovely pundit-friendly terms such as open innovation, come one, come all, it's all open for you? Wikipedia isn't open. Most of what's presented as open innovation is far from open. They demand a tremendous amount of know-how, a tremendous amount of capital, both social and economic such, that the most people in the world do not actually have. The emancipatory project innovation studies is almost nowhere. But at the same time, and now I have to kind of excuse some of my friends at the Danish AI Pioneer Center, since I work with them. It's not them who presented the idea that AI would solve all these big global innovations. On the contrary, it's innovation researchers. It's innovation researchers being the marketeers and the ad executives for those people who actually innovate. Who want to kind of turn it into these glib presentations and so on. I've interviewed quite a few AI researchers as of late, since I'm supposed to be setting up a section for understanding algorithmic data practices. None of them use the word innovation. For them, the word innovation is nonsense, a term that has no content, no meaning. It's the kind of empty bullshit used by other researchers who can't actually do what they're doing. And I think it's important to kind of ask the question, is the correct way to improve innovation to banish innovation studies, to stop the charade, to stop the attempt of marketing these things and giving them fancy new terms? I'm very much at the point where I've actually discussed with my dean of stripping me of the word innovation, simply because I find it so problematic that we are still putting this on our posters, our business cards, in our headings. My new section will not have innovation in its name, on general fucking principle. Maybe a bit provocative kind of comment there, but my point in kind of connecting the entrepreneurial state, the manner in which AI is presented, and open innovation is why I talk of innovation pornography is to highlight this, how fetish objects, which is a very SDS term, or as I would, from a slightly more psychoanalytic perspective, look at it, objects of desire are created, are reified, and then represented into discourse. That to me is gravely understudied. And thus we so often get back to what my friend Andre Spicer over in London would call innovation bullshit.
Great, thanks for that provocation, Alf. And I better not mention that innovation is part of my job title, so let's see if I can get that stripped. Alan.
Is it okay? You can see whether there's people in the audience, so please don't let me push in front. I can't see that, and it'd be nice to get a rate. I totally agree with that last point. I don't think the scientists in the center I was referring to, the Pioneer Center, are motivated by innovation at all. What Alf says is completely plausible. I don't think they sat and came up with that image and suddenly thought, let's present this. I mean, the whole point of the Pioneer Center is how can Denmark win more Nobel Prizes? That's right. That's the idea. But I think there was a problem calling them Nobel centers because I think there may be some controls on who can use that term, copyright or whatever. So that's, I'm sure, what the ethos is. But it's still nevertheless interesting that presumably having made the decision to set that up on scientific grounds, and then in terms of its public legitimation, then the word innovation comes in as precisely the all-purpose activity. So I'm not saying it's the scientists themselves. I'm saying it is the presentation of science, which is a familiar issue. I used to find similar things around public engagement with scientists. Many of the working scientists were very open. They were intelligent people. They were reflecting on these very issues. Also working in areas like genetically modified food. They would have a range of discussion, but it was poorly represented in those who claimed to speak on the scientists' behalf. I just need to say two things. One is about power, which came up. I recognize the question, of course. I think, and again, SES is not unique in this. I'm not trying to say it's only SES, but I think one of the things which comes out of SES work is to see power as an output and not an input. So rather than say, scientist X won this debate because they had the power, which seems to me not particularly useful as an explanatory category, they say, well, the power is a process, it's an outcome of relations. I always think you could look at the British Empire circa 1930 and imagine that's the most powerful nation on earth. 15 years later, it looks very, very different. I'm no historian, but power moves, it's dynamic. So I think the contribution, it's right to talk about power, but I just get uncomfortable when it starts as like it's the set pieces on a chessboard rather than, well, power can take all kinds of twists and turns. Nations collapse, companies collapse. So we can't just assume ab initio where the power is. And then I need to say something about microsociology. I think there can be something very powerful, to use that word, about qualitative research, that sometimes it can open your experience. I think empathy comes into that as well. Whereas statistical presentations often pass us by. We know that because of charity appeals. We can have millions of people starving somewhere in the world. But one story of a mother and her child will capture us way more. So there's a room for both. I think it's not to say SES should only do qualitative research, but a well-done piece of qualitative research which can connect broadly can be an extremely powerful way of moving forward, where frankly the kind of large macroeconomic models can simply fail to get that. So it's about a contribution to these discussions also around power, rather than saying it should only be one way of looking at these things. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. bit mindful of time, so I'm just going to look around the room and see if there are also some questions in the room that want to be posed. Yeah. No, everyone's saying here that they're really enjoying the debate. No pressing questions. So if there are no remaining pressing questions, allow me just to take first of all the opportunity to thank you all for this really energetic panel and amazing discussion, and also to highlight, of course, our very own journal NOvation. In case you haven't looked at it yet, what a shame! Definitely do. It's open access. We've got some exciting issues. One recently published. With an opening paper of Renee, who's here, on the reform of science, and also many more issues on the way. So definitely have a look, and also if you have ideas for papers or thematic issues yourself, then by all means do propose them to us. So yes, thank you again, and I look forward to well, staying in touch and how the discourse further develops.
Thank you all. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Have a great conference.
Thanks.